Saxophone Beginner, Building a Mental Map of the Buttons and Keys. Part 1, Introduction. As a beginner, the chances are that you've started your journey with the saxophone by choosing a student model, and I'll assume that it's an alto saxophone, which is an E-flat instrument. And so your instrument is likely to have 22 or 23 keys that you can depress. I'm going to assume that it does have 23 keys, as that's pretty standard now, even for student models. The keys come in two varieties. There are the circular, pearl-covered keys on the front of the instrument. For convenience, I'll call these keys buttons. There are 3 of these for your right hand, and most likely 5 for your left hand, only 3 of which you will be using regularly right now. The other 2 are for more advanced use. Let's call the 3 that you will be using now the regular left-hand buttons. So, for the present, you will only have to use just 6 buttons on the front, 3 for each hand. Actually, there's one more key that I'll call a button. This is the octave key that's located at the back of the instrument. As you can see, it's not pearl-covered and looks more like a lever, but it does form a logical group with the 6 pearl buttons on the front. This will become more apparent as we progress. All of the other keys, that is, all of the metallic, usually brass, keys scattered about on the left-hand and right-hand sides, I'll simply call keys. It's quite likely that you've already had some experience playing the saxophone, so you'll probably have realized that the full range of the instrument runs from low B flat up to high F sharp, a total of 33 notes. Of course, as a beginner or early player, you probably won't yet be able to go down to the very lowest notes, nor can you reach the very highest notes in that range. But you may probably know that most notes in the lower register, from low D to upper C sharp, can be played just using the large round buttons on the front of the instrument, and this also applies to the same notes in the upper register if you use the octave key at the back of the instrument. Thus, with 2 exceptions, all of the notes from low D to high C sharp can be played by using just the button keys on the front of the instrument, with the addition of the octave key for the higher notes. The exceptions are for note D sharp or E flat, and note G sharp or A flat in each of the 2 octaves covered. To get those notes, you will need to use one of the metallic keys on the sides of the instrument. Now, since the range from low D to high C sharp covers most of the full range of the instrument, that leaves only the 4 very low notes and the 5 very high notes either side. These all need the use of the metallic keys. That's all very well and good, but what's the pattern for using those metallic keys? The pattern for using the buttons is fairly simple and logical. The more fingers you use, the lower will be the note that you'll get. Conversely, progressively lifting your fingers from the buttons gets you higher and yet higher notes. But what about the metallic keys? Is there an easy to understand pattern there? Well, the purpose of this video is to show that there is a pattern. Indeed, 3 distinct patterns that, once realized, will help you to play the instrument with confidence. Part 2. Acquiring a mental map. To help you understand things better, I'll use an interactive computer program. On the right here is a diagram of the saxophone, complete with all its buttons and keys. At the moment, the saxophone is shown just as you see it in just about all of the fingering diagrams in the music books that you probably have. In other words, the saxophone is shown as seen from the front, with the mouthpiece at the top and the bell end at the bottom. Now, personally, as a player, I have difficulty in doing the mental gymnastics needed with this approach so as to relate the displayed fingering to the placement of my fingers on the buttons and keys. The problem is that the right-hand buttons and keys are shown on the left side of the diagram, and the left-hand buttons and keys are shown on the right side of the diagram. It makes more sense to me to display the diagram as you see the saxophone when you look down over the front of the instrument as you play it, like this. Now the right-hand buttons and keys are on the right side, and the left-hand buttons and keys are on the left side. Granted that the mouthpiece end is now shown at the bottom of the diagram, and the bottom bell end is shown at the top, but at least there's no confusion about the right and left sides. So I'll continue to display the saxophone diagram in this way for the rest of the video. At the bottom of the screen is a keyboard. It's configured to match the E-flat transposition of the alto saxophone. The keyboard is interactive with the saxophone diagram, so selecting a note on the keyboard automatically selects the corresponding fingering for that note in the saxophone diagram. And it works the other way as well. Selecting a key in the saxophone diagram automatically paints little green bars on the keyboard to show the note or notes for which that saxophone key is used. In the middle is a flip card that shows the note selected on the keyboard or in the saxophone diagram as it's seen in the music staff in your playbooks. And this too works in reverse. So selecting a note on the flip card automatically selects the same note on the keyboard and in the saxophone diagram. Now, it's relevant to mention that some notes on the saxophone can be played in more than just one way by using alternate fingerings. But for the purposes of this video, for those notes, I will use only the main or usual fingering option. When describing the patterns for using the buttons and keys, in this part of the video I'll deliberately refrain from giving names to each of those buttons and keys. There are a couple of reasons for this. In the first place, there's no single universal naming system, but more importantly, as a beginner, it should be easier for you to identify the buttons and keys by their physical locations rather than by some arbitrarily assigned naming system. In Part 4, I'll mention briefly how each metallic key is usually named. Disclaimer: B-flat fingering. This video is aimed at beginners, and I think that it's easier for a beginner to build a mental map of the buttons and keys by first concentrating on fingering that uses only the 6 main white buttons on the front of the instrument, rather than using fingering that involves any of the side keys. For that reason, the main fingering for B-flat is shown as simply pressing just the first finger of each hand on those white buttons, like this. In due course, once a satisfactory mental map has been gained, the beginner will want to adopt the more conventional main fingering for B-flat, which includes the use of the right-hand side B-flat key, like this. Let's start with the basics. In other words, just using the buttons. As I said in Part 1, most of the notes in the range from low D to high C sharp can be played by just using the buttons. This range is indicated by the purple bars now drawn on the keyboard keys. So let's see this by starting with low D. You can see that all 6 of the regular pearl buttons, marked 1 to 3 for each hand, are depressed. Now, using only the white notes on the keyboard and slowly moving higher from low D all the way up to high C, you can see that at no time do we need to involve the use of the metallic keys. And, as you probably already know, the fingering on the saxophone is identical for the ranges low D up to C sharp and D up to high C sharp with the single exception of adding the octave button for the higher of those two ranges. So far so good, but what about the black keys on the keyboard? There are 5 black keys in each octave. Still sticking with the range from low D to high C sharp, 3 of those black keys can also be played without using the metallic keys. So F sharp or G flat, then A sharp or B flat, and lastly C sharp. So that leaves only 2 black notes that need the addition of a metallic key. Firstly, D sharp or E flat, and then G sharp or A flat. Both of these notes require the addition of 1 metallic key. In the case of D sharp E flat, the metallic key is found second up from the bottom on the right side of the instrument and is activated by using the little, that's the pinky finger, on your right hand. This is easy to locate because the 3 other fingers of your right hand are already pressing down on their respective buttons. The G sharp A flat note is played using the pinky finger of your left hand to press down on the uppermost flat metallic key in the group of 4 on the left side of the instrument. Again, this is easy to locate because the 3 other fingers of your left hand are already pressing down on their respective buttons. As you can see, there's a kind of symmetry between these 2 notes. One uses your right pinky finger together with all 3 of the other fingers of your right hand, and the other uses your left pinky finger together with all 3 of the other fingers of your left hand. In both cases, the metallic key is the uppermost one in its group. If we could limit our playing range from low D to high C sharp, we would only ever need to use just those 2 metallic keys, but we now need to consider the 4 notes below low D. For this group, it's convenient to start with low C. This requires the use of the bottom key on the right side of the saxophone. Again, this is activated by your right pinky finger together with all 3 of the other fingers of your right hand. Next, we'll go to low C sharp. Here the fingering is the same as for low C, but with the addition of an additional metallic key on the left side of the instrument. This time, your left pinky finger presses on the leftmost of the group of 4 flat metallic keys on the left side of the instrument. Moving down to low B, the same fingering applies except that your left pinky finger moves across to the rightmost of the group of 4 flat metallic keys. Lastly, to get to the lowest note, low A sharp or B flat, the pinky finger moves to the bottom key in that group of 4. So, to summarize the pattern for the fingering of the 4 lowest notes, they all require the use of the bottom metallic key on the right side of the instrument. One note, low C, does not require any other metallic key, but the other 3 notes require the use of one or other of the metallic keys nearest to the bottom on the left side of the instrument. Lastly, we come to the 5 highest notes in the saxophone's range, that is, from high D to high F sharp or G flat. As a beginner, you'll probably not need to go above high E, but we might as well look at the higher 2 notes as well to complete the set. Naturally, we need to use the octave button in each case. But what's the pattern here? Well, for these notes, we use some permutation of the palm metallic keys on the upper left side of the instrument and 2 of the metallic keys on the right side of the instrument. Starting with high D, only the leftmost palm key is needed. Moving up to high D sharp E flat, you add the top palm key as well. For 1 note higher at high E, you also add in the uppermost of the group of 3 metallic keys on the right side of the instrument. This is activated by using the side of your first finger of your right hand. Moving on up to high F, you simply add in the bottom palm key so that now your left palm is pressing on all 3 palm keys and your right first finger is pressing on its metallic key. Lastly, to get to high F sharp or G flat, you also use your right middle finger to press the fairly large metallic key located just below the group of 3 keys. As you can see, the fingering of these 5 notes just builds by adding an additional key each time you move up a note. But, as I said before, the highest note that you're likely to encounter for quite some time is high E, so for the present you don't need to bother with the 2 highest notes. We have now covered all of the notes in the E-flat alto saxophone's range, but have we covered all of the buttons and keys? Well, no, we haven't. There are 5 that we have not mentioned because they're only used in alternate fingering arrangements, and as a beginner you can probably just ignore them. That being the case, I'll only mention one of them now so that you can see how it provides an alternate to the main or usual fingering. This is the small pearl button on the left side of the instrument. Let's see which notes it's used for. These little green bars on the keyboard show that this button is only used for 2 notes, the 2 A sharp or B flat notes in the lower and upper registers. If we select one of those notes, say the lower one, you can see that this note can most easily be played by using just the first finger buttons on each side of the instrument. However, there are alternate fingering options, and one of these uses the small pearl button. Part 3. Summary. In the range of low D to high C sharp, most notes are played by only using the buttons. The exceptions are 2 black notes in each octave, each of which requires the addition of 1 different metallic key. Let's color-code those keys on the saxophone diagram to show that their use has been identified. The lowest 4 notes all involve the use of all 6 regular buttons and the bottom metallic key on the right side of the instrument. That's all that's needed for one of them, low C, while the other 3 notes involve the additional use of one or other of the bottommost 3 of the group of 4 flat metallic keys on the left side of the instrument. Let's color code those keys to show that their use has been identified as well. In addition to the octave button, the 5 highest notes use an additive pattern of keys that involves the cumulative use of palm keys on the left side of the instrument and 2 of the metallic keys on the right side of the instrument. So if we add our color coding to these keys too, then we're left with just the 5 unused buttons and keys that I've marked here. And as a beginner, you can simply ignore them. Part 4. Key Names. The final matter that I'll cover today is how the buttons and keys are named. As I said before, when beginning, you should be much better off by identifying keys by their physical locations, rather than by their names. However, it's likely that your music teacher will use names when identifying them, so here's a quick run-through of the names that are usually used. We'll take them in the same order that we used before, starting with the 2 keys used in the middle of the saxophone's range. This is the E-flat key and this is the G-sharp key. Going to the lowest 4 notes, this is the low C key. Here is the low C-sharp key. Next to it is the low B key. And then there is the low B-flat key. Moving up to the 5 notes in the high register, this is the high D key. Next comes the high E-flat key, followed by the high E key. Then comes the high F key. And lastly comes the high F sharp key. That completes the set of keys that are used for the main or only fingering of all of the notes in the alto saxophone's range. All that remain are the keys that are only used for alternate fingering. So, this is the F sharp key. This is the B flat key. This is the C key. This little button is named B flat. And this button or key is named high F. I hope that this video has now given you a better overall mental map of how the saxophone's buttons and keys are used, so that you can more confidently tackle your future steps in your journey when learning to play this wonderful instrument. If you liked this video, maybe you could consider hitting the like button and maybe also hitting the subscribe button. Thank you.